Hi, welcome to lesson 135 and 136 for history for 6th grade. All right, and at this time, I would like you to pause the video and read the pages 261 to 263, just from the 14.5, so just to the comprehension check there, and just take that moment to read through that, and then we will begin. All right, as we are looking at our history for right now, the 20th century, the end of the 1900s, we bring it to a close. And so as you guys have grown up in the 21st century, I caught the end of the 20th century, and but you guys are really the 21st century, and so we're really coming closer, as I've mentioned in the last lesson. We're really coming closer to the time, some things that you will really recognize. Okay, so President Bill Clinton, William Clinton, was the president that began in 1992. He won the Democratic Party election. He did some good things in his presidency, but he would not be, I would not, I'm glad that he is no longer in the running. He's no longer very popular, so he doesn't really have a chance to come back to that. But there were many things that he did that were immoral and that were wrong. And so, but he did, during his presidency, he sent American troops on UN and NATO peacekeeping missions to the nations of Somalia, Bosnia, and Haiti. And he was involved in peace talks between Israel and Palestinian leaders. And so those were some good things that came from that. But he did reduce our American military, our ships, our war weapons, our aircrafts, our troops down in numbers. And so we were not, we didn't have our military presence that really our country needs. And so as a result of some of those things, terrorism came to America. And this is kind of some of the things that started in 1993, February 26th. There was a bomb that was planted by Islamic terrorists at the World Trade Center. And so this did not destroy the building, because that did happen as part of the terrorist attacks in 2001, but this was 8 years before this, but it did kill 6 people and injured over 1,000 people in that bomb. On April 19th of 1995, a bomb exploded in Oklahoma City in a federal building, or outside a federal building, and that one killed 168 people. That time, it was actually an American terrorist, a man by the name of Timothy McVeigh. You may have heard his name, I'm not sure. And he was convicted and executed for his crimes. And so you see a picture there of the building that got destroyed in the federal building. And it was an awful thing that happened. And so we also had some terrorism abroad, and that's just kind of a couple of things, and there were other things that have happened. But in 1998, 258 lives were lost in 2 explosions, one in 2 American embassies were bombed, and that was, or had explosions in Tanzania and Kenya. And that was Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda, the terrorist group, were behind those attacks. And in 2000, in October, Al-Qaeda attacked again. We had an American destroyer that was the USS Cole that was in the port of Yemen. And so if you know where Saudi Arabia is, think of Saudi Arabia is the top of that. It's the majority of that piece of land. But at the bottom, there's two smaller countries. They're about equal in size, and it's Yemen and Oman. And so that's where that is. If you have that picture in your mind, 17 U.S. sailors lost their lives in that explosion. And that was, these things that were happening were just awful, that people would be killed because of these terrorist groups. But in the midst of that, the information age, our technology was increasing. There was something called the World Wide Web, or the internet, that was introduced, and in 1991, and that really, by 2000, over half of U.S. households had a computer in their house. And so this was a big deal. I remember we had a computer, one of those old gray monitors, and we had a gray box that sat on the floor, and it connected to it. And we had a little keyboard and a mouse. And so we'd have to press the button on the computer box, and then we have to press it on the monitor, and then our computer would come alive, and then we'd have to go and we'd have to start the internet. And if you started the internet, it was dial-up, and it was connected to the phone. And if you turned on the internet, then nobody could use the telephone. That sounds really crazy, but if you picked up the phone while someone was on the internet, what you'd hear was, it was a really crazy noise. And so you'd know to hang up the phone. And so we just had to make sure that we couldn't use both at the same time. And that was what dial-up was. Now, of course, we have Wi-Fi, and it is so much quicker, and then you can use your phone and your internet at the same time. And so that's really the information age. And we had the Whitewater investigation, the scandal that happened in the White House. You remember the Watergate scandal that was with the President Nixon. But this is President Clinton, and there were some rumors that he was being immoral with a woman that worked in the White House, and he had and there was also rumors of illegal business dealings. And so they brought him before the House, and in Congress, they brought him before the House of Representatives, and they voted, he lied in front of them, in front of a jury, and for perjury, they voted to impeach him. But now that has to go to the Senate, and when it went to the vote for the Senate, they actually denied, there weren't enough people to vote to impeach him. I'm sure there were some people, but the overall vote that came from the Senate was that they would not remove him from office. And so he was the second president in history to be impeached. So he was impeached, he just wasn't removed from office. And Andrew Johnson was impeached in 1861. There was a decline in our academics and school violence, which brought an increase in our Christian school movement, which had been started a few years before that, and the homeschool movement. As many of you are feeling the homeschool right now, and we're part of the Christian school movement, of course. And but one event, and I just want to talk about this event for a little bit because I do remember this one very vividly. I was actually being homeschooled at the time that this had happened, and we were living in Colorado, and we were living in southwestern Colorado. It's a small city called Delta, and not to be confused with Delta, Utah, but this is Delta, Colorado. And Morgan and Ryan, you would know that it's really close to Grand Junction, where some of the CACS people are from. Pear Park is in Grand Junction. So it's just like 15 miles away. So it's kind of like Green River and Rock Springs, Delta and Grand Junction are two close cities. So we lived in Delta. My dad was a pastor there. And I was sitting in the living room, and I had already done, it was early in the morning. I hadn't done school yet. I was sitting and I was eating breakfast, and across the news came this story that two students walked into Columbine High School in Littleton, Colorado, which is not too far from where I grew up near Denver in Thornton. In fact, my brother lives in Littleton, but the Columbine High School so this was April 20th, 1999, two students walked into this school and with automatic weapons and started shooting. And sorry. I get emotional over these things, but I wouldn't want to not get emotional over the death of people. But they killed 12 classmates and a teacher, and they wounded 21 other students, and then they killed themselves. And these two were not right in the head, but they also, it was found out later, they also had a hatred for Christianity. And there was a student named Rachel Scott, who was an outspoken Christian. And in fact, she had witnessed to these two. She had told them about Christ, and they hated her for it. And she was one of the ones that was killed. But she had a clear testimony. And in fact, there's been a movie that was made on this. It's pretty violent. So because of the nature of this. So I would definitely want you to check with your parents before you go and watch it. I think it was on Netflix for a time. I'm not sure if it's still there, but it's a tragedy that happened to this school, and it affected many schools worldwide, or across the U.S. But I'm sure it affected others in other countries. But then there were other incidents that have happened in schools that was close to this time, and others have gone in and have opened fire in schools, and it's awful for that to happen. A school should be a safe place, but we understand that it's not always a safe place, because there are people that are violent and people that do not understand some things, and so they take it out in a certain way. And so this was something that I just wanted to highlight, because it was something that impacted my life. And I remember crying and being overwhelmed by this. So there's a few things that have happened that I really can connect with, and this was one of them. But moving forward to the election of 2000, there was a really close race between Al Gore, who was the vice president at the time under Bill Clinton, and George W. Bush, who is the son of George H.W. Bush. And he was our 41st president. Now, George W. Bush was the governor of Texas, and they are from Texas and very much have that Texas integrity and outlook on life. He was a compassionate conservative. He really wanted the people to do what was right without the government's aid. He promised reforming welfare, cutting taxes, strengthening the military. And so it came down to a vote of one state, of Florida. And it was so close that they questioned it, and so they had to recount. And for 36 days, they recounted each county's votes by hand. And they were we waited to see who would become the next president. And on my birthday, December 12th, I actually don't remember this happening on my birthday, but it's cool to see it on the page. The Supreme Court ended the vote counting, and they declared George W. Bush the 43rd president. And later, the recounts verified that he really did win the majority of the votes in Florida. And so it's just interesting that these things can happen. And it really, the whole nation was in this uncertainty of who's going to be our president. And everyone who wanted one or the other candidate are praying hard to see who is really going to become the president, and wanting their candidate to be in office. And so that's really what I wanted we needed to cover and highlight for you. So there's a comprehension check there, and there's also a CCU. So CCU 14, section D, numbers 4 through 7 to do on paper. And this comprehension check, I'll have you do that on paper as well. And the reason I had you read it at the beginning of the lesson, so if you didn't, shame on you, but I need you to reread these pages as well. So if you didn't read it and stop and read it at the beginning of the lesson, I want you to read it 2 times, okay? It's not very long. But I really want you to know this information and know this section, and then we will talk about it next time.